It's Ronnie Bringle, and we're painting a color wheel of fruit. This time I would like to paint the orange spot. We did our yellow-orange last time, and so this time I'd like to paint the orange spot. And I'm going to move ahead also and paint the red-orange spot. So I've chosen to paint an orange in the orange spot. And then we'll paint a nice apple in the orange-red spot. I've worked on a few of the leaves and gotten those finished up here. And I've placed a few leaves behind the apple so that I can work on those after I get the apple in place. We're ready to begin, so let's go ahead and paint our orange. I'm going to do some stippling so that I can create a bit of a textured look. I'll have to do a little bit of preliminary work before I actually start making it look like an orange. So I'm going to create these bumps in here as the orange kind of curves down into where the stem sits. So to start with, I'm going to just stipple these little sections and let those kind of stay there for a little while until I get some dark in between those little bumps. But just to start with, I'm going to be using my yellow-orange color for this lighter area. We want to make it look nice and fat and round here. So I'm using a little bit of the lighter color, but then I'll pick up the orange and work into that. Now normally we would have painted this orange before painting the pear, but since we're painting the colors in order on the color wheel, we'll just have to kind of scooch that right up to the pear, and then when we're all finished with the orange, we can fix that pear. It's not that hard to do. But like I said, normally if you were just painting this, you would make sure this orange got painted before you painted the pear. Now I want to create not really a very, very even edge on this orange, because oranges are kind of bumpy. So what I don't want it to be fuzzy either. So I'm picking up paint on the tip of my brush, and I'm kind of going at an angle and pushing that paint out to the edge in a hard edge, but it's kind of lumpy. It's not fuzzy, it's just got tiny little lumps on it. And then I don't want to create anything on this orange that's in the shape of the pear, so I have to be careful of that. And as I said, I can easily fix my pear, so I'm not going to try to avoid it completely. Okay, so I've got some orange on, and over here, I don't care if this is fuzzy on this part here, because I am going to put a leaf there. We'll back up a little bit so you can see the leaf sits right here on this orange. So I'm not too worried about that spot, but I do want to create a nice edge right here where the edge of that orange is going to show. Okay, so then I'm just going to pick up my light color again, which is my yellow-orange. And again, I want to place this in those lumps and let it come down onto the fat part of the orange so that eventually it will look round. And we have to do several layers of this, just like I had to do a number of layers on all the other pieces. I'm going to go into a darker value now, because we do need to have what we call a shade color in order to set this orange behind. But also, we want to create a textured look on the orange. And in order to do that, you have to have light and dark value changes in order to create texture. Because if you think of it as like maybe that the orange is covered with a whole bunch of little bumps, then each one of those bumps would have a light and a dark value on it. And to show that, then you have to create this light and dark value. And I find that it's easy on this orange to start creating that darker value kind of early, and that way we can have that to work with, stippling some light values back into it to create the texture that we want. So I'm just getting right now, and I'm kind of going straight up and down on the tip of my brush, but then when I want to blend it, I just kind of lay the brush down a little bit. I'm not really washing my brush between colors. I'm just blotting the paint so that I can get these colors to blend nicely. Now, I've got about 3 or 4 layers on here now, probably closer to 4. And so it's time for me to dry the surface and do the next layer. Now I've gone back and forth a couple of times and added my yellow orange and my red orange, and just starting to build up enough layers on my orange so that it will cover up the black background. And so at this point I'm going to pick up some a little bit extra red with my orange, because I want it to be just a little bit more red than my orange mix. And I'm going to use my round blender, and I'm just going to use it dry so that I can just lightly rub some red over this light area where the bumps are. And so I want to just create some darkness to begin with. Then I'm going to go back into my yellow orange. And the really beautiful thing about working with red and yellow and oranges is that you don't have to wash your brush. If you want to go into something that's a little more on the yellow-orange side, you can pick up a little more of the yellow, or the red-orange, you just pick up a little more of the red. You don't have to wash your brush in between, and you just get a lot of nice, good changes from that yellow-orange to the red-orange. Because of its place here on our color wheel, we want this orange to be more red-orange than yellow-orange. But I do want to have some yellow orange up here on the top where the orange might just naturally have more yellow in that area. But also I want to create those bumps. So I'm using a little more yellow, and I'm not washing my brush. Like I said, I'm just going back and forth between yellow, yellow-orange, orange, and also picking up a little bit of red-orange in some places. So I'm back into my red-orange again, and remember that in order to make orange, we mixed red and yellow. So if you get this yellow a little bit too far down, or you get too much yellow on, all it's going to take is just to pick up some of the red-orange, stipple and kind of rub over that to take it back into the red-orange color family. I've gone back and forth a couple more times now with my yellow and my yellow-orange and my orange and a little bit of red-orange. So now I've taken my orange color and I've mixed it with a little bit of blue. Blue is across the color wheel, so it's going to give us kind of a gray look, and we can use this color as kind of a shading color. So where this orange is hiding behind that leaf, and also where it's facing away from our light source, which is here in the middle, we'll add just a little bit of this grayed orange color that I made by mixing my mixing my blue. Now I'd still need to add a little bit more depth to the orange, and I also want to create some darker stippling that I can use to stipple light back into. So I've actually gone into my red-violet color now. I'm still kind of in that red family, and it's got a little bit of blue in it because red-violet is the blue and the red, so I feel like I'm safe with that. And so I'll pick up my red violet and maybe then add a little bit of the red orange. So I'm kind of just going back and forth in my yellow orange, orange, red orange, to create a number of different values of orange. But then we have to have this shadow color on here where I've picked up a little bit of blue with my orange. Now I'm going to wash that out of my brush and then go back to just plain orange. After all, that's the color we're wanting to make it. I'm going to stipple that into my brush, but I'm not going to blot it out very much, because what I want to do is to create a stipple that looks a little bit textured. And so I've got more in my brush, and I'm using a lighter touch so that you don't really want it to look fuzzy, but you just want it to look like it has a little bit of texture. This is just my orange color. And now I'm also going to stipple with that color up into my light value, my yellow and yellow-orange area here. And because I'm trying to create some texture. So then what I'll do is pick up some, I'll go back to my yellow-orange, the lighter value, put that into my brush so that I can stipple again with texture. So I blotted some of it out, but I didn't blot all of it out. And now I can stipple this light color back over the darker values and in the lighter values as well. And to make it look like an orange, I have to move back into the yellow, just, to give it the color of an actual orange, because we're not just talking about the color orange, we're talking about the fruit orange. The fruit that is named an orange. So we have to think about making it somewhat realistic. So I've got some straight yellow on my brush, but I only added that to a dirty brush. So I did have some of the yellow orange in my brush and added some straight yellow. So what I have to do now is just go back and forth a couple more times so that I get what I think is a good blend and good color, a realistic color. Now I will add a little bit of my white value, my white color to my yellow orange, and I'll stipple a little more lightness in the fat part of the orange. And I'll probably want to play with this a little bit, but basically the orange doesn't take too many coats, and it's probably pretty close to being ready to put the little stem and the leaves on. So I think we'll leave the orange there, and we'll move on to the apple. For my apple, I'm going to use my Filbert blender, and I'm going to fill this spot with the red-orange value. I'm sorry, I keep saying value. The red-orange color or hue. But first of all, we have to kind of set this apple up so that we can, again, make it look like a realistic apple, but have it mostly be painted with the red-orange color. So the first thing I want to do is to lay down some yellow, because realistically, a lot of apples do have quite a bit of yellow on them. There are certain kinds of apples that are just pretty much all red, but they're not quite as interesting as the ones that have some yellow on it for artistic purposes. So I'm going to lay down quite a bit of, this is just my straight yellow, and I just want to put that down kind of thick. And then I'm going to wipe my brush out. I'm not going to wash it, but I am going to wipe it pretty clean and pick up my red-orange color. The red-orange, I want to lay this on right out to the edge of my apple. I want to cover up those pattern lines now. So I'll lay that on. The apple has a little kind of a bump down there at the bottom. And after I get some of that red on, then I'm just going to use a very light touch and whisk that red into my yellow. Now you can see why I put the yellow on in a bigger space than what I actually want it to turn out, because you got to have some place where you can blend those two colors together. If you don't have any yellow all the way out there, then you run out of space to blend and the apple is just going to be red. So we have a challenge here again with having this orange right there on top of the apple. Generally when I paint a project, I take a look at the overall project and I start with the very most underneath object. And so you would look at this pattern and you would start with the piece of fruit that was the most underneath, that didn't have anything else under it, and you'd start from there. And that would make the most sense. What I've discovered is a lot of people, if you try to paint something underneath something else, like we're doing here with this apple, then you end up getting a little halo around the orange where you've tried very hard not to get any paint on the orange. The trick here is to not worry about the orange, knowing that you can come back and fix it easily. So now I've got these two colors blended together once, and I might be able to cheat a little bit while this is wet and put on another little bit of a layer, as long as I use a really, really light touch. And I'll just lay this red on rather heavily actually, and with just a really light touch, just kind of sweep it into the yellow. You'll notice where I'm holding my brush, I'm quite far back on the handle. I'm not up in here. Move back here where you can use a really light touch and whisk that paint into each other. Okay, so I'll get a little more down there into the yellow, and then I'm going to pick up my yellow one more time before I have to go to the hairdryer. It's going to turn a little bit orange, but I think we can fix that. And I think I'll bring some of this yellow up around, just, you know, for variety, just to make it an interesting looking apple. Pretty much to the point where it got to be dried now. I've gone back and forth a few times now with my red, orange, and my yellow, and you can see that I've started streaking some of that red into the yellow. We don't want to end up with a whole bunch of yellow on this apple, just kind of a little yellow shine. And so as I'm going along putting color on, I'm stretching that yellow out so that I have a place to blend it to the red, but then I am pulling that red quite a bit into the yellow as well. At this point my surface is pretty dry, so it's almost like dry brushing the red over the yellow. I've got a little yellow again here, and I want to make sure that down in the throat I want to have that kind of nice and yellow in there. So we'll just put some in there and then kind of blend it around. At this point, if I wanted to have some green showing in the apple, like not just a straight yellow but kind of a greenish yellow, then I could pick up my green, and in this case I'm going to pick up the yellow green that we mixed and just put that kind of over the yellow here and there. I'm not going to cover it all up, but I kind of like the way that looks. Then I'm going to go back to my red and streak just a little bit more before I start. We're going to put some little red streaks through there, but I'm going to do it in a more detailed fashion with a smaller brush. So for now I just kind of want to just pull, just kind of dry brushing over that yellow a little bit. Now I need to create some shading so that my apple will look round. So I'm going to go into my red violet. That's right, almost in my same color family. It's got a little blue in it. And I'm going to add that where this apple turns away from the light source. And I want to add a little bit where it's going to sit underneath the orange as well. This darker value is going to do two things. It's going to shade the apple, but I'm also going to use it to create texture or patterning on the apple. So this is my red violet. Sometimes I get so involved in the painting of the thing I forget to talk. And depending on what your reference is, you know, your reds are going to be light or dark in certain places, and it's going to depend on what you want your apple to look like. But when an element is fat and then turns inward, many times people want to make that upper edge, or that one edge of the inward turn, they want to make that light, but really when something is turning back away from the light, it has to have a little bit of darkness on it to make it look like it's turning away. So right along here is what I'm talking about, where the apple is fat, but then it turns in and goes downward into that depression where the stem is. So I'm washing my brush now. I'm going to pick up yellow, just a little bit of yellow one more time, and where I want to see a little more of a shine on the apple, I'll just whisk a little bit of yellow. And this is pretty easy to do if you let your surface dry. If you try putting a lot of yellow, wet yellow over wet red, you're just going to get orange. So if you let that red dry and then put the yellow on, then you'll get a little bit better results. So I'm thinking that I'm getting pretty close here. And of course I'll play around with it a little bit once I can get a little closer to it and focus on it. But now I'm going to take a smaller brush, like a little spotter or a tiny little round blender, or I can use the number 4 spotter. In this case I think I'm going to use this number 2 round blender. And I don't want to go too dark too fast, so I'm going to go into my my red orange, and then I'm going to pick up some of my red violet with it, so it's not too terribly dark. And I'm going to decide how much patterning I want on this apple. In other words, how many streaks do I really want to do? And you know, a lot of times less is better. You can kind of give the idea without really putting as many streaks as what would actually be on a real apple. But this, you know, just a little bit will help it to look realistic. So I rather like this, and if I decided that was enough, then I'd be ready for my highlight. And so then I would take my white, and I think I'll go down in the size of my oval blender, And my white is my Titan Buff, or in the Just Sonia it's the Smoked Pearl. And I'm going to put that on my oval blender, and I want to just make sure that I can whisk this on very lightly. I don't want to make it real strong. I don't want it to turn pink, so it's best to do this over a dry surface. And your apple can be as shiny as you want it to be, but it's not going to be shiny like a mirror, so don't make this highlight too bright and too harsh. Okay, so then that apple is ready for the stem and the leaf. And I'm also ready to fix up my orange and my pear from where I was working. Okay, so I'm just going to take my my round blender again, go into my orange color, but because of where this is, I had already put a little bit of extra red into my orange, so I'm going to do my orange plus a little bit of red orange. And once you get your red orange in place, you'll be able to tell how what color you really want to use on your orange, because it's all relative. You know, everything is balanced against the other things. So when you look at your apple and you see how much orange is in your apple, then you can judge how much orange to put in your orange. I hope that made sense. So I just want to make sure you can understand how to just go back in there and stipple, just like you did before when you were making your orange. You can go back in and stipple to clean up the edge. And on the pear, it's just a matter of taking a smallish kind of oval blender and go back into your yellow and your yellow-orange color. Pick that up with maybe a little bit of water on your brush, not too much, but a little bit, so that you can just tap this right over any little furry edges you might have made with your orange, which I'm hoping you won't be doing, because you'll be starting with the, you'll be putting that orange underneath the pear to begin with. So there now is our orange. Let's put it this way. We're going from our lemon, which is yellow, to the pear, which is the yellow-orange, to the orange of the orange, and the red-orange of the apple.